So how was your Waitangi day? Did you relax? Did you head out somewhere to enjoy the warm weather? Did you get out on the water? Anyone go boating? That's 2 services so far that no one went out on the water. Okay, that's good. It's all right, because I'm not talking too much about that. But a change of landscape, a change in a shift in perspective can help us gain a new appreciation for life, can't it? I guess that's why we love our holidays. We love a change of scenery. A change of routine is good for the soul. I think the best breaks, though, are the ones that alter our perspective for good, or at least for an extended period of time. The experiences that leave us resolved to continue to look at life a little differently. Maybe to walk more or spend more time with people we love. Maybe to keep looking up and around. Holidays that leave a lasting impact on our daily routine. When did you last have one of those? The calling of the first disciples in the Gospel of Luke is a perspective-shifting encounter. As we reflect on this passage, we might consider our own sense of call and how we might grow into our most authentic self. Of the 4 Gospels, Luke's is the longest. He's also the only one to have written a sequel. In fact, he's contributed more content to the New Testament than any other writer, including Paul. Luke has a lot to say. All the Gospels emphasize that God's great purpose is being worked out in the world and is clearly seen in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. But what we find particularly in Luke's writing, especially in his sequel, is that this great purpose involves us too. The church is supposed to carry it on. Luke is at pains to point out that what we do from here on in matters, that we are part of God's unfolding story. As we just heard, today's text begins with Jesus and the crowds standing together on the shore, where Jesus is speaking to them about life and about God. At the water's edge are 2 boats. The fishermen are busy cleaning their nets, perhaps lending a half ear to what is being said. It's Jesus in the midst of everyday life, the busyness and exhaustion of work and chores. But then Jesus moves. He steps into one of the boats, into the symbol of everyday working life for the people of Galilee, and he moves out a little from the shore and then begins to address the crowd again. Why the shift in perspective? Why the change? As any speaker knows, it's best to speak from a clear vantage point where you're able to be seen and heard. And maybe that was part of it, but I think there was more to it than that. There was something in the movement that suggested that a shift in perspective is necessary to hearing and responding to God's call. As Henry Ford said, if you always do things the same way, you'll always get what you've always got. It seems that Jesus was intent on changing the landscape of his listeners for good. How clearly do you see your life? Do you think you have things under control? Have you had a chance recently to take a step back and have a good look at the landscape you are creating? What do you like about what you see? What do you wish you could brush over? When Jesus stepped into the boat, the crowd immediately became more attentive. The fishermen whose boat it was paused, most likely in their task of cleaning up, and maybe listened a little more closely. It's a bit like if I stepped out from behind this lectern and sat down beside one of you and kept talking, it would capture attention, wouldn't it? Most especially of the person I was sitting beside. I imagine we'd all probably feel a little bit uncomfortable too. But Jesus knew what he was doing. It was more than just a clever trick to capture attention. It was first and foremost for those who just got out of the boat. The fishermen who were cleaning their nets. Had they found what they were looking for? Were they living authentic and fulfilled lives? They certainly hadn't found the fish they were after. But as for those bigger questions, I'm not sure if they'd even considered them. They'd returned to shore with nothing. And Jesus came to them in the midst of their cleanup, in the midst of what had been a bad day at work, where things had not gone as planned, to offer them something they were not expecting or even looking for, helping them to see life and to see themselves from God's perspective. And in so doing, Jesus revealed something about God to the whole crowd. Something that, for whatever reason, we often forget. That it is God who first moves towards us, not the other way around. Like the words in a child's baptism, we love because God first loved us. We engage with faith. We come here because God first came looking for us. God came to us in the midst of the ordinariness of our lives, into our homes, our offices, and invited us to look up and around, to see and experience life at a different level, to see ourselves and others as God sees us, and to offer us the kind of fulfillment and purpose that each of us is looking for but don't necessarily know how to get. Which brings us to the second half of our text for today and the title of today's message, But Because You Say So. Have you ever been asked to do something you really didn't want to do? Have you ever been asked at the end of an exhausting day to do a quick job that you knew was anything but? It's annoying, isn't it? At the end of a hard day, we just want to put our feet up. We certainly don't want to be called back into work to redo what we'd already done. We don't want to be asked to go deeper into the very thing we're trying to forget. And yet this is exactly what Jesus asks Simon to do. Simon, who's in the midst of cleaning his gear after working right through the night, is asked, well actually the text implies he's told, to put the boat back out into the deep water where he's just spent an entire night with nothing to show for it, and to let down the nets which he's only just finished cleaning for a catch. It's not difficult for us to imagine how Simon would have felt at that moment, is it? I think it would have warranted more than a "that's crazy." It's not difficult for us to picture the look of "you gotta be kidding me" on his face. I imagine it would have looked something like this. Because we don't appreciate it, do we, when someone thinks they know more than we do in our particular area of expertise. And what are we most expert in? Our own lives. I remember a speaker at an end-of-year dinner for school leavers talking about how he understood his life as one big play in which he was the lead actor. He was an actor, this guy. And there were other people in the play too with starring roles, but there were also lots and lots of extras milling about and entering the story from various points, such as the guy down at his local dairy. And he went on to say that everyone is a lead actor in their own story, with a cast around them, and that he plays an extra in hundreds of other people's lives, including the dairy owners. It was therefore important to treat the other actors, including the extras, with respect, because they were leads too. They were experts on themselves, creative directors, if you like, of their own play. The talk was quite well received. It especially appealed to the students at that stage of their lives. In fact, I think it appealed to everyone, really. This idea that we were the star of our own show, this affirmation that we were the central point of our own story. I enjoyed the image and the encouragement given to the students to ultimately respect others regardless of position and status, but on reflection, found the outlook of the speaker to be inherently flawed. Faith and belief in God, I think, suggests we are not the masters of our own destinies. Faith in God, I think, requires a recognition that we do not always know what is best, that our expertise on ourselves is at times questionable, that so often our pursuit of individual happiness only ever comes up short, and that maybe true fulfillment involves trusting in something greater than ourselves. For us, that is the will of God. This was the crossroads that Simon found himself at. Do what he wanted, which was to put the unsuccessful day to rest, knowing there'd be another day tomorrow, or follow this teacher, this rabbi, out into the deep again. You can almost hear his thought process. I know what is best when it comes to my life, and I want to finish cleaning up and go home. But, when it comes to the crunch, am I? The dominant voice and ideology of today suggests if you want something, go get it. If you want to be happy, go and get it. If you want to succeed, do it. You alone can make it happen. But this is not the message we find in the biblical texts. In fact, the prophet Jeremiah proclaimed that such a view, such an approach to life, is in fact cursed. It's kind of empty. He says that people who try to live without God, who trust only in themselves, in their own strength, are like the desert plant that knows no season, only what it is to survive. It's as if they've lost sight of the big picture. It's as if they've cut themselves off from the true source of life. But, those who trust in God, those who depend on God for strength, for joy, for insight, for forgiveness, should be like a tree planted by the waters with roots that run deep, so that when trouble comes, when the seasons do inevitably change, when life takes them into the depths, as it always will, they continue to flourish. Was Simon aware of Jeremiah's warning? Is that why he said, but? Because he knew that the one making the request had the power to transform his emptiness, his empty nets? I don't think so. I think Simon was unsure. I think he was exasperated, actually, at the request. But, aware that he was lacking something, if only fish, he responded, but because you say so, I will. And in that moment of surrender, his entire life changed. In that moment, Simon made the decision to allow God to influence his life at every level, to direct it, to star in it, that through him others might come to know the love and forgiveness, the joy and wonder of God. Who is your greatest influence? Who do you depend upon? The dominant voice of today would say, trust no one, depend on yourself. But Jesus says, when it comes to your life, trust in me. When it comes to your work, to your success, to your fulfillment, trust in me. When it comes to living out your faith, trust in me. When it comes to your relationships, to finding meaning and fulfillment in life, trust in my ways, not your ways. For as the prophet Isaiah declared, God's ways are higher than our ways, God's thoughts higher than ours. God helps us to see the big picture. God helps us to swim in the depths, to find joy where there was frustration, to find abundance where there had been nothing to show for our efforts, to find courage even when we're afraid, and to hope in the midst of despair. Theologian, poet, and Church of Scotland minister John Philip Newell talks about surrender being a spiritual discipline. He says you actually have to practice it, because as humans we resist it at every level. And he suggests a process by which to do that. This is what he says. When you feel something is wrong in your life, don't ignore it or deny it. Instead, sit quietly and hold the feeling in your heart. Listen to it. Search from where it's coming. Then as you hold the feelings in your heart, ask God for strength and mercy. Ask God to walk with you as you go deeper into the feeling and surrender the cause to God in prayer. Over time, as you repeat this practice, you may discover your connection and relationship with God growing stronger and stronger. So might we engage in the spiritual practice of surrender this week, despite all the reasons we can think of not to. Might we learn to say like Simon did, but because you say so, I will. Amen. May we do so.